Crowding. How many people have climbed the Half Dome before? Okay, was it that bad the day you guys went? No? You know, one of the areas right now where they're in a public comment period on, are they going to limit the number of summits to Half Dome? One of the strategies that they looked at was actually removing the chains, which are helping facilitate people get to the top, until they were recently designated as a National Historic Landmark. So you can't remove the chains. So they're trying to determine should it be a permitted, should it be a limited amount of use for summiting Half Dome. But that gets at this bigger issue of crowding and encounters that some of us have been seeing. It's trying to define really what is an encounter. You know, I talk to a lot of my students, and for them it's proximity. If the person's right in my face, if they're right next to me, and I can't get away from them on the entire trip, that's too much for me. But if I see them off the distance, that's okay. And so some of us is like, well, what's an encounter then? You know, where is our crowding coming from? You know, or do we actively watch and try to see how many other groups are around us? You know, again, as a researcher, that's my problem. I start counting how many people I ran into every day. But probably the rest of you don't necessarily always do that. So it's just trying to understand, when is it crowding? When is it not crowding? When are these encounters causing challenges for us being able to achieve the types of experiences that we want? And then again, how are we coping with them? You know, are we rationalizing? You know, because we invested time and money and energy to get to these places, do we rationalize that we have a good time? Or are we displaced? Do we go someplace else? You know, some of you are probably, you know, I heard some of the groups in the front talking about, well, I don't go there anymore because that's not my wilderness experience anymore. I'm going to go someplace else. Or maybe I go on different days of the week. I know the middle of the week is going to be the quiet time, so that's when I take off time from work. And I don't go on the weekends anymore because that's when all the other individuals go. Another big issue, you know, and this is something the college students keep me very abreast of, is we've seen this change in extreme sports and activities. You know, and how they're being characterized, and we really don't know yet how these are impacting the wilderness or the wilderness experience. Again, it's kind of questions of, you know, are these the kind of activities that are going to become more the norm than the rarity? You know, what is this going to be doing for our types of experiences where, you know, people are trying to set these up for lots of different reasons, you know, whether it's for promotional videos, whether it's for sponsorships, or whether it's strictly for an activity. What are these things going to do? Are they going to be large challenges that we have to face because our wilderness areas provide the places where you can do these types of things? You know, so if this wasn't Switzerland, but this was jumping off of Grand Tetons, or again off of, you know, Half Dome or those types of places, what's that going to necessarily mean? We've also moving into a really sticky situation when it comes to communication and sharing experiences. And this is kind of your social media quiz. If you can identify more than 5 of these logos for social media sites, maybe we have a problem. So, I mean, even when I looked at it, I didn't realize that, wow, we really have a lot of different ways to communicate. You know, and this is the way of communicating for those younger generations, and even for other generations as well. My students do never call me on the phone anymore. Yeah, they want to be my Facebook friend, which I don't allow them to be. But that's the way they want to communicate. Can I Facebook and text you? It's like, no. Send me an email or call me on the phone. But these are the ways that people are communicating globally. You know, so social media, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, that's the way that communication is being done. And it's part of it is this this expectation of instant access. They want to be able to get information quickly. They want to be able to share stories quickly. You know, with Instagram, they want to be able to take a picture, publish it, and have everyone see just what they were doing a moment ago. Whether that's in an urban area or that's in a wilderness area. It's something that they have an expectation of. So that changes, I think, the nature of how we are able to utilize that within a wilderness setting. You know, so even, you know, the catchphrase of YouTube is broadcast yourself. You have a generation that's okay with always broadcasting what they're doing. How much of that's going to happen in wilderness? You know, how much of that should happen in wilderness, if at all? How are we going to do that? Or is this an opportunity for us as managers, as support organizations, to communicate better? So, I mean, these are the ways that people are communicating, and we have to make those decisions. I think part of it comes along with the idea, too, that I think generations have really moved to being experience collectors. They have this notion of, been there, done that. They got that bucket list of experiences they want to have done. So maybe that is, I kind of did one yesterday. Coming from Michigan, I had never been to North Carolina, I'd never been to Kentucky, and I'd never been to the Appalachian Trail. So I walked on the Appalachian Trail by about 5 feet, took a picture, and said, I'm on the 18th. I'm really excited that I'm here. As my wife's holding the 3 children in the freezing cold wind going, hurry up and have your experience. But I'm here right now. Because that was one of the things I wanted to do as a wilderness professional. I'm like, I haven't had an opportunity to go there. I can't miss the opportunity to at least be near or on the Appalachian Trail. But I think that's how a lot of our generations are now. It's see the Grand Canyon, it's see Yellowstone and Old Faithful, or it's hike the hike, take the ride, take the drive to get to these places. And again, you go back to communicating. That's how they're sharing their experiences. They go back and they're blogging about the most excellent trout fishing in a backcountry lake they've ever done. And they're sharing that to the world through their blog, through Facebook, through those different methods. And it's a different way of us getting oral history, where we used to sit down with your elders and they tell you the stories. Now we're all the information creators ourselves. And the stories aren't being passed down the way they were. They're now being broadcast. And again, is it right or wrong? I don't know what the answer to that is, but it's something that we have to adapt to. Quick thing to talk about, I think, is day use. This is an issue when it comes to trends and visitation that is oftentimes can be a very big head scratcher for managers. Just because we don't know if this is an opportunity or an obstacle. Opportunity side, there's a very strong argument for we're getting more people exposed to wilderness settings. A wilderness hike, wilderness ride, on a horseback, a paddle. Great opportunities to get people exposed, to connect those individuals, to make them stewards farther in the future. But we don't know the nature of that experience really well. And the Boundary Waters was another great example of that. According to statistics, 60% of use is supposed to be day use. But when we were out in the field, that was about 8% of our sample. We couldn't find the day users. We didn't know where they were when we should have known where they were. So we had a difficulty understanding, well, where are they going? How far are they going? Is there a length of time that they need to go to make it a wilderness experience? How far away from the trailhead or the put-in point do they need to be before it's a wilderness experience? Is it a different visitor profile? Some of the data has suggested, Troy Hall and David Cole's data, that it is a bit different. Day users tend to be a little bit older. The female gender split is a little bit stronger, so there's more women that tend to be day users than overnight users. But we don't know if that's the same across different types of activities and across different areas. Troy Hall and David's work has mainly been in the Northwest, and I'd say that probably holds well in the Boundary Waters in the Midwest as well, having older day users, more women day users, but we haven't been able to examine that in a lot of other regions as well. So that's something we need to understand is, what's that profile look like? Is it the same income, the same ethnic changes, the same group types? Is it families? Is it friends? Is it organized groups? Those types of things. And then lastly, how do we cross that bridge of managing those numbers? Is day use something we are really going to put efforts into to limit, to expand? Where are we going to put our energies? Is it an overnight? Is it in day use? Is it a mixed approach across the two of them? I think something to talk about would be, how do we deal with this issue of the recruitment of the new visitors? So, there we go. Where is this generation going to come from? So we're not seeing it in the Boundary Waters. We're not seeing the younger folks coming. How's that going to apply in other wilderness areas as well? How do we continue to recruit the next generation of visitors that then hopefully turn to stewards and advocates as well? How are we going to do that? I think that's an important implication for management that we're going to spend a lot of time over these next 2 days at the conference here talking about. I think we're taking a lot of steps trying to answer that question, trying to move forward. How are we going to develop our communication strategies? Are we going to use social media? Are we going to use traditional communication strategies? And how do we communicate to as wide of a population as possible? How do we reach as many people as possible? How do we identify barriers? So how do we solve the problem that there's barriers to female participation? There's barriers to unhealthy people participating, overweight people participating. What are going to be our strategies for that? What are going to be our strategies to deal with that? And how do we promote this idea of a relationship with wilderness? Because I think that's really what's important, is we're trying to build relationships that people have. And in those relationships comes a level of trust. So when they trust the managing agency, when they trust the stewards for it, that helps our cause for wilderness. When you think of a relationship, you can think of it as a personal relationship with a partner, with a family member, with a colleague. When there's mutual trust, it's usually a very successful relationship. And that's why I would argue we want to continue building between advocates, stewards, professionals, managers, all the people in those roles, having this trust there. So that our ongoing collaborations and engagement help us continue to build that constituency, help strengthen that, which will then project that strength out to the other individuals who aren't part of that community yet. There's the individuals that don't have as much stake in wilderness. By us demonstrating trust in ourselves and trust working together, can we get them to understand the importance of our relationships and mitigate those concerns that they have? Because if we get to that end point of fostering a relationship with wilderness, if people have individual relationships with wilderness, which I would assume almost all of you in this room do, you could tell me your favorite wilderness area and why it's important to you, why you work so hard to protect it. We can foster that in people. That's going to go a long ways to protecting all those diversity of values. When we have that, the values that we try to represent across the wilderness landscape is really going to be successful there. And that's really when we're stewards of the wilderness, but we're also stewards of this relationship. When keeping people connected matters to us as professionals, that's going to go a long ways for our success. Because that's going to demonstrate that trust. When people see we're protecting why your place is important, when I say I've protected this opportunity for you, I've protected this special place for you to have these experiences and to pass these on, that's how we're going to protect all those different meetings for all those different uses that people have. So I'd like to thank you for your time, and if you have any additional questions, we have a few minutes left to wrap up.